All right, ladies and gentlemen, looks like we have another beautiful, beautiful example of what it means to get woke and go broke by literal definition. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been meaning to cover this story and I've been forgetting, to be honest with you, but I'm not going to let this one slide. And the reason why is because this guy was out here saying some absolutely ridiculous shit, the likes of which got him eventually fired, perhaps, or maybe he just ended up losing his job to DEI. That's ultimately what I think happened. So we have an article here from That Park Place with a headline that reads Dungeons and Dragons executive producer Kyle Brink, who wanted white men out of the hobby, is now no longer working at Wizards of the Coast. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys remember Kyle Brink, I did a video on him ages ago when he initially made that statement saying that white men don't need to be in this hobby, right? Like white men, the perception of white men leading the hobby that is known as tabletop games or card games or anything like that doesn't need to apply, and white men should leave the hobby. That same man, right? That same white man, mind you, literally got fired from Dungeons and Dragons. So let's get into this article, guys, from That Park Place. But of course, before we do, if you are new here, just consider hitting that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it, and like the video to push us out into that YouTube algorithm. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, get woke, go broke to the maximum. His ideology is the reason why this man got fired, because ultimately what ends up happening at Dungeons and Dragons, that obviously you guys know is extremely woke, right? Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, they are embracing DEI like no other, okay? And of course, Kyle Brink is now the latest example of what happens under that particular ideology. It looks like he got his wish. Kyle Brink, a former executive producer on Dungeons & Dragons who wanted white men out of the hobby, is no longer working at Wizards of the Coast. Brink's LinkedIn profile confirms he's no longer working at there after spending 3 years and 4 months at the company and nearly 2 years as an executive producer on Dungeons & Dragons. It appears Brink's time as Wizard of the Coast ended in May. Brink infamously shared that he wanted white men that look like him to remove themselves from tabletop gaming at large. During an interview with the YouTube channel, Three Black Halflings, Brink said there's been mistakes made in years past where people assumed that Dungeons and Dragons players were all, white dudes in a basement, which has been a faulty assumption for a lot of years and gets more and more false every day. And so in my viewpoint, honestly, guys like me can't leave soon enough for this hobby. Well, it looks like, Kyle, you finally got your wish. And this is why ideology has no place in overall entertainment, because eventually what ends up happening is that a lot of the people that push this stuff are white people, which is amazing to me. It's like they're advocating for their own erasure. And then they decide to say, okay, well, people like me can't leave fast enough. Well, guess what? You're gone now. You are gone and you are out of a job. I'm sure you'll find another one, but you're out of a job right now simply because your ideology has now come for you. It's only a matter of time. You can shill for the ideology. I'm sure that's great and everything. And you can do it from a safe space, right? Where you're employed, you're making good money, blah, 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 right? But the moment that ideology comes for you, yeah, you really can't say anything. You can't complain. You can't cry about it. You're just going to have to move on. It says Brink was also in charge of Dungeons & Dragons during the disastrous open game license decision, which would provide Wizards of the Coast with a 20 or 25% royalty fee for all earnings over $750,000 from third parties using the OGL. It would also give Wizards of the Coast creative control over products created using the OGL. The leaked plans of the OGL resulted in massive backlash with publishers such as Paizo, Free League, and Kobold Press to start their own licenses. Numerous customers began canceling their subscription in Dungeons & Dragons as well. And it would eventually backtrack it on their proposed changes, and Brink would admit that he was to blame. Brink said in an interview with Bob World Builder, changing the OGL did not give as much as it would cost everybody, and so therefore it's dumb. This was a terrible mistake, and the first thing you do when you're in a hole is stop digging. It is unclear why Brink departed from the company. However, his departure comes as Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons began promoting their upcoming 2024 Player's Handbook, 2024 Dungeons Master's Guide, and 2024 Monster Manual, which comes out in September of 2024, November, and February of 25, respectively. Despite Brink's departure, there appears to be significant rot still present at Dungeons & Dragons, as evidenced by the recently released Dungeons Dungeons & Dragons: The Making of Original D&D 70 to 77, which attacks the original creators of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, I spoke about this book. I spoke about how they basically try to demonize the original creators of Dungeons & Dragons and make them out to seem like evil white men or whatever the case may be. But again, this ideology is running rampant. Just because they got rid of Kyle or Kyle got rid of himself doesn't mean that this is going to change anything, right? Like, this man, his ideology is still running rampant throughout this company and is going to continue to do so, right? So I don't see much coming from this, but I just find it to be absolutely hilarious that somebody who shills for DEI eventually got removed for DEI. I wonder who his replacement was. I really do. If his replacement was anybody other than a white guy, I'm going to laugh my fucking ass off, right? Because ultimately, you asked for that, right? You wanted that. You said that that's what should happen, and it happened. The preface for the book, written by senior designer on Dungeons & Dragons, Jason Tondro, states that some language in the first iteration of D&D presents a moral quandary. The documents reproduced in his book include many pages of charts and tables alongside lists of monsters, spells, and magic items, but the game content also includes a virtual catalog of insensitive and derogatory language, words that are casually hurtful to anyone with a physical or mental disability, or just happen to be old, fat, not conventionally attractive, indigenous, black, or a woman. So, my God, the sensitivity is through the roof. Just think about this, right? This original book was from the 70s, right? The 70s, for all intensive purposes, was not that long ago, right? 50 some odd years. Think about that really quick. 50 some odd years. And we went from open dialogue, where you can essentially use whatever words you want to describe your characters, your world, or whatever, to now people saying, oh, this might hurt people with, who might be sensitive, or derogatory language, or have a physical or mental, like, who gives? Shut the fuck up. I cannot with these people who are so weak. And what they do is they try to pass off their weakness to other people, and then they try to gaslight you, and they say, oh, it's just being empathetic. No, it's not, man. It's just being weak. Tondro continued, some people have charitably ascribed this language to authors working from bad assumptions. In the 1970s, historical war gamers in America were predominantly white, middle-class men. It isn't surprising that they would double-class the soldiers the fighting man. When in the pages of the Greyhawk, the description of the Queen of Chaotic Dragons includes a dig at women's lib. The misogyny is revealed as a conscious choice. It is an unfortunate fact that women seldom appear in original D&D, and when they do, they're usually portrayed disrespectfully. Tondro went on, slavery appears in the original D&D not as human tragedy that devastated generation over centuries, but as a simple commercial transaction. Well, the thing is, that's literally what it was, though. Like, slavery, for anybody who understands the history of slavery, it was a business. It was one of the most profitable businesses out there. It was treated as such, right? It was treated as a literal business. Was it humane? Absolutely not. But it was treated as a fucking business, and everybody operated it as a business. That it really wasn't from a racism standpoint. It was from a business standpoint, because there was a lot of people who were slaves of multiple different races, not just black people. I know liberals don't want to understand that, but there was slaves of every single race at one point in time, and it's all about money. That's really what it is. Money was the root of that evil, not so much racism. The cultural appropriation of D&D ranges from the bewildering, like naming every 6th level cleric a llama, to the staggering gods, demigods, and heroes. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this is from the book from the 70s. We spoke about this in the past, and there's obviously no need to rehash it, but ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, the simple fact is that D&D has gotten rid of Kyle. It is official that he is gone, and honestly, this has to be the funniest thing that I've seen in quite some time. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you did enjoy it, and if you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hypnotic out.